This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at ease.com, California's top one-stop website for legal marijuana delivery, and now an option for the same for everyone living in the Portland, Oregon area. And of course, for the rest of us, there's easewellness.com for hemp-derived CBD products via mail delivery in 41 U.S. states. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Monday, April 1st, 2019, and you're tuned in to episode 695 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Michigan grabs today's top spot with yet another reprieve for the 50 or so unlicensed medical marijuana provisioning centers, as dispensaries are officially known in the state, that have been facing an order to shut down. This is a well-trodden storyline here on the Daily, and late last week, Michigan Court of Claims Judge Stephen Borrello added a new angle when he issued a restraining order on a deadline of March 31st for unlicensed shops to shut down. The order is active for as long as the court maintains and also covers a ban that was to go into effect at the same time on caregivers selling untested cannabis directly to provisioning centers. Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer made some headlines last month when she dissolved the Bureau of Marijuana Regulations and recently announced that Andrew Brisboe, the Bureau's current director, will lead up the new cannabis regulatory agency starting at the end of this month. If you do business in Michigan, I'd probably pop over to Michigan Live for all the details. The California Department of Food and Agriculture issued a press release late on Friday announcing that it, along with the Bureau of Cannabis Control and the California Department of Public Health, would issue provisional licenses to marijuana companies operating with expiring temporary licenses. Regular listeners should remember this storyline where a lag in the process of license renewal applications has created a steep cliff of anticipated expired business licenses. Given that such a precipitous loss in licensed businesses would effectively shut down the new legal cannabis industry, it's good to see that state regulators seem to be snapping into action now on staving off as much market disruption as they can. Businesses will need to have submitted a license application to the correct authorities and cannot change their business operations or locations. This is another one I'd read in full today. We swing over to the East Coast for our final top story today as the Boston Globe's Todd Wallach and Dan Adams are reporting that the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission is investigating whether the state's limit on the number of marijuana business licenses that can be held by one person or corporate entity is being sidestepped by a number of multi-state cannabis operators, mainly two companies, C. Hunter Therapeutics and Acreage Holdings. The Globe recently published a longer-form story that picked apart some of the corporate relationships and financing schemes that are seemingly being used by Acreage and C. Hunter to acquire more than the 3 licenses allowed. In a day filled with stories to open up and read, I'd throw this one into the mix. I should probably disclose that we have a working relationship with KCSA Communications, which works with Acreage Holdings. We produce the Green Rush podcast with KCSA. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, ease.com, California's top one-stop website for legal marijuana delivery, and now an option for folks living in Portland, Oregon. If you like getting legal cannabis products that are properly tested, packaged, and labeled, then you're going to love being a customer of Ease, where a love of compliance runs just as deep as a love for making legal cannabis delivery easy. Don't waste a minute of your limited time in driving to your favorite local dispensary when Ease can help bring their wares right to your door. Ease only partners up with the best shops in their active areas, so you know you're in for a great customer experience. And as always, Ease.com is also a fantastic source for legal cannabis industry insight and analysis through the regular reports put out by Ease's editorial team. Pop over to ease.com to soak it all in, and then tab open easewellness.com to see all the different hemp-derived CBD products up for order there. All right, time for the blitz. The Washington Post has an important Associated Press story up about California Senator Kamala Harris, who is running for president as a Democrat in the 2020 election. Senator Harris is a former district attorney with a fairly dismal record when it comes to social justice and criminal justice reform, even as she's pivoted in recent months to shore up her image as a reform-minded candidate. The AP's story dives more into those details and should be on your list of stories to read. On Friday, Maryland-based marijuana company Curio Wellness dropped a lawsuit it had filed just a few days earlier on Monday, seeking to halt the state from awarding more marijuana business licenses. The backlash to that lawsuit was fierce and immediate, as the new licenses are meant to go to non-white entrepreneurs who were mostly shut out of the initial license granting phase. Curio's founder and CEO Michael Bronfein defended the lawsuit's intent as to protect his company's business interests and said that it was not meant to, quote, challenge the effort to improve diversity within our industry, unquote. The Drug Policy Alliance, or DPA, just pulled off a brilliant early April Fool's prank with the launch last week of a supposed new cannabis social club steeped in exclusivity, privilege, and a touch of racism. The country club Cannabis launched with a website and Twitter account announcing itself as a bastion of exclusivity located in New York City. Visiting the club's website at countryclubcannabisny.com reveals faux leather backgrounds, fancy fonts, and the following quote from the club's supposed founder, L.H. Taylor, reading, quote, "I created the Country Club Cannabis because I wanted a luxurious, safe place to be with people I trust. Turns out I found a white space in the industry," unquote. Thankfully, the whole thing is a stealth campaign by DPA and marketing agency Virtue to drive people to sign a petition asking New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to include the expungement of marijuana crimes from people's records in legislative reform efforts. Nicely done there. Commonwealth Magazine has another story that you need to open up and read today, as it's just one of those days. This one looks at Massachusetts and how things are going for some of the participants in the state's social equity program, which helps candidates meeting certain requirements secure a marijuana business license. Those candidates are meant to be people from communities most negatively affected by the war on marijuana, and last May, 120 program participants were announced. But as the Commonwealth's story has it, none so far have been able to secure a license. This is a hugely complicated problem and one that we need to get right. So you guessed it, I'm going to suggest you read it as well. Speaking of Massachusetts and social equity and justice programs, Marijuana Moment has a good interview up with Shalene Title, one of the 5 members of the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission and the person most often credited for all of the focus the state has on including social equity provisions into their system, as imperfectly as they may have been implemented so far. Shalene is also an on-hiatus regular on our podcast, Marijuana Today. I would read this one as well. And finally for today, the DEA would appreciate it if you would all stop calling their offices with offers to smoke thousands of pounds of marijuana per hour, as the agency requested in a recent RFP intended for large-scale commercial incinerators. We picked up on this one here on The Daily, as did a lot of other media outlets, which has apparently prompted thousands and thousands of industrious stoners and cannabis consumers to call the DEA, offering up their services. The DEA just put out word that it does not want to hear from private citizens on this one, only if you have a giant industrial incinerator capable of burning up thousands of pounds of cannabis per hour. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at MJ Today Daily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, Ease, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in, starting your day with Marijuana Today.
One take, Shay. One take. take.